Halloween Horror Nights at Home is back this year in support of the Trevor Project, and we're taking you back to Halloween Horror Nights 30 to recreate one of my favorite desserts and beverages from the event. Coming up. Welcome back to Curious Cocktails, folks. I'm Greg from Grego Movie Rants, and this is Curious Cocktails, the cocktail show where we talk about the history, techniques, and recipes behind all your favorite mixed drinks. But today's episode's gonna be a little bit different. As Greg from the past told you, today we're gonna try and recreate a dessert and a mixed drink from Halloween Horror Nights in conjunction with HHN at Home. You see, today's episode is a collaboration that is part of HHN at Home. HHN at Home is an online event that celebrates all things Halloween Horror Nights at home. And this year, HHN at Home is back to fundraise for the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project is a fantastic organization. They are a group that seeks to connect life-saving resources to LGBT plus youth in crisis, and now more than ever, those kids need our help. You can find out more about this fundraiser and the rest of HHN at Home by following the links at the top of my description. So why Halloween Horror Nights? What brings this onto the show? Well, you see, despite being a bit of a scaredy cat growing up, I've always had a fascination with the horror genre, and Halloween Horror Nights was no exception. Even though I wouldn't go to the event itself until I was an adult, I still have cherished memories as a kid clicking around on those interactive websites that Universal used to host and trying to see if I could find any secrets about the event online. But once I finally went to the event for the first time, I was truly snake bitten, and let me tell ya, there's nothing quite like strutting through the front gates thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm gonna go through all 10 of these houses, this is gonna be easy street. Despite the fact that you've never actually been through a real haunted house before, Greg. And then finally going through your first real haunted house for the first time ever, and being so viscerally rattled to the core that you question why you even came to the event in the first place. And that house for me was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So as we indulge in some nostalgia from Horror Nights past, I'm gonna do my best to recreate the Leatherface Cherry Pie and the Texas Heat Margarita from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre themed food booth that we had at Halloween Horror Nights 30. When it comes to the veracity of these recipes, things are pretty touch and go at the moment. It becomes more true every year that one of the core offerings of Halloween Horror Nights slowly becomes the food, making the event a kind of Halloweeny food festival of sorts. And I have no problems with this development because Lord knows, the only reason I'm still going to the Rat Park is for their food festivals as well. Despite this growing development, Universal has not quite reached a point where they feel comfortable enough giving us the insider recipes for the food that they give us in the parks, so until that day comes and we get an HHN cookbook, what I have to go off of are insider rumors and reverse engineering the recipes based off the ingredient list, so humor me if you need to. We're gonna start off with the Leatherface Cherry Pie, and thankfully my insider sources have some really good information on this, to the point that I pretty much know exactly how to make this dessert from Horror Nights. The secret recipe to the Leatherface Cherry Pie from Halloween Horror Nights 30 is in fact just a cherry pie from Publix. This honestly does not surprise me at all. I mean, if Publix is not the biggest grocery store chain here in the state of Florida, it's among the top dogs, so it makes sense that Universal would contact them to get some help in making those desserts for their event. And with a relatively simple internet search, I was able to find a recipe for a fresh made cherry pie on the Publix website, so I'm pretty sure if we add some spooky facial embellishments, this will give us our Leatherface Cherry Pie. Just a quick note before we proceed. The recipe that you'll find on the Publix website is for a single pie that has 8 servings, and if that's what you want to do, go right ahead. But if you want to be a bit more accurate and serve some mini Leatherface cherry pies, I recommend cutting this recipe in half in order to make 8 mini cherry pies. With all that out of the way, let's make them pies. To make the Leatherface Cherry Pie, you'll need 1 pound of fresh cherries, 1 cup of sugar, a 1/4 cup of cornstarch, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, as well as your pie crust and pie dough. You might also need an egg wash for your dough depending on the kind you use, and optionally, you can add a drizzle of cherry syrup at the end for a blood splatter effect like they did at Horror Nights. Make sure you preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, I'm not French, in Celsius. While your oven gets in heat, remove your cherry pits and try not to look like you stuck your fingers in a faceless dude's face. Once you've got a bowl of pitless cherries, add your cornstarch, sugar, cinnamon, and vanilla extract to the bowl and toss them balls around. Now if you've downsized this recipe to make mini pies like myself, you might think it's a good idea to flip over your pre-made mini pie crust cups to cut out some perfect discs of dough. Do not do this. If you do, your crust will crumble like the Berlin Wall and you will be very sad. Instead, you should put your finished cherries in your pie crust as they await their doughy cover. When you have your dough discs ready, carve 3 holes into the surface to look like a pair of eyes and a mouth. Place them on your pies and press the edges down firmly so they connect with your crust. You may want to crimp the edges instead. Then add a nose-shaped ball of dough to the middle of the face. Don't worry about those faces looking a little lopsided, because as crafty as Leatherface was, he was never a stickler for perfection, and neither should you. In fact, you should experiment with fun embellishments to give each pie a personality. Add stitches and scars, hell, make one of those faces happy. I'm sure one of these dudes was happy to be cannibalized in cherry pie form, for some reason. Anyways, with your dough faces ready, give those faces a final egg wash if needed, and they're ready to get their cool summer tan. Bake your pies in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for roughly 60 minutes, keeping an eye on them just in case. At the end of the hour, carefully remove your pies and let them cool for about a half hour. Be sure to serve these wacky dudes shortly after cooling or keep them in a warm oven until they're ready to serve. And that's how you make some Leatherface Cherry Pies. Now, to the surprise of absolutely no one, the cherry pie was not only delicious, but it tastes exactly how I remember the Leatherface Cherry Pie from Horror Nights, so I'm pretty confident standing behind this recipe as the Leatherface Cherry Pie. But now we gotta make the Texas Heat Margarita, and that's where things become considerably more challenging. So here's the problem with the Texas Heat Margarita. As with many theme park cocktails that are served at temporary food booths, this was a pre-made batched margarita, and as a result, I don't have footage of anybody making this drink, and I can't find a copycat recipe anywhere. This means I have to reverse engineer the cocktail based on the ingredient list, and some of these ingredients are easier to find than others. For example, Blanco tequila, lime juice, blue curacao, and tahini, which for those of you not aware, is a spice blend that makes everything it's sprinkled on taste like Takis. And you and I both know that you know what Takis taste like. Because I know that you were having Takis for breakfast in high school, weren't you? But then we get to the more involved ingredients such as agave nectar, chili bitters, and tamarind. Just tamarind. Not tamarind juice or tamarind pulp, tamarind extract, tamarind syrup, just tamarind. What kind of tamarind did you put in the drink, Universal? I have to assume that the agave nectar and the tamarind were included in the drink in the form of syrups, and thankfully they're both relatively simple to make. You can easily make agave syrup at home by making a simple syrup and replacing your sugar with agave nectar. I couldn't find a really easy recipe for tamarind syrup online, so I had to fiddle with ratios and make my own, and ultimately I settled on 1 part tamarind to 4 parts sweetener and 4 parts water. I split my sweetener in half by making it 2 parts honey and 2 parts agave nectar, and that added some rich honey notes to the syrup that didn't overwhelm the tamarind flavor, but if you want to keep the tamarind the star of the show, stick with agave nectar or another neutral sweetener. That takes us to the hot bitters. Now if you want to be smart, you can just buy some spicy bitters online and call it a day, but I wanted to challenge myself for this video and make my own spicy bitters at home. I found that I have orange bitters on my shelf with a similar ingredient list to the spicy bitters that they use in the original cocktail, so all I have to do is add the missing spice component and I'm good to go. A spicy tincture is a pretty straightforward process and I can make it relatively simply because I grow hot peppers in my garden, so I can make my own spicy bitters at home in a relatively short amount of time without having to wait to age my own bitters. The process for making a hot tincture looks a little something like this. Making a tincture is a surprisingly simple process. All you'll need is a solvent such as vodka or Everclear, your material of choice, in our case peppers, and a jar to keep them in. You're going to start off by breaking your desired ingredient into smaller bits. This will help your solvent better extract the flavor from your ingredients. So we're going to chop up 2 jalapenos and a serrano pepper of varying levels of heat. Tinctures are effectively flavor extracts that use a solvent like alcohol to produce a densely flavored liquid. Since I'm using a vodka with 40% ABV in this tincture, I'm going to need to submerge my peppers in 5 times as much vodka by weight to ensure the process goes smoothly. So once my peppers are all chopped up, I'm going to put them on my scale and measure them. I have 36.6 grams of peppers here, so I'll need roughly 183 grams of vodka for my tincture. According to the internet, this is roughly 6.45 ounces, so I'm going to pour 6.5 ounces of vodka using my jigger into this jar. And once everything's submerged in the jar, you can seal it and give it a shake. Be sure to shake and stir it around every day, and that is how you start a tincture. Once you've aged the tincture for about 2 to 3 weeks, it's ready to be bottled and separated from the solids. And this is where your fun begins. Because in order to avoid the month-long process of aging my own bitters at home, I had to find the proper ratio between my spicy tincture and the orange bitters I had on my shelf, which means taste tests. Lots and lots of taste tests. Of course, I had to start things off properly by tasting the tincture on its own. Its yellow-green color and sweet vegetal smell gave me concerns at first. I was worried that the flavors that were extracted were in fact the sweet vegetal notes from jalapenos and serranos and not the heat like I wanted, but those fears were quickly proven wrong. Oh my god. Oh, okay. So, it worked. That tastes like all the heat from the serranos and jalapenos I put in there. Oh, it's coming back. I thought I had the worst of it already. With the spicy tincture proven effective, I now had to find the proper ratio between my spicy tincture and my orange bitters, and the way I thought of it, the recipe could only go one of 3 ways. Either we have 1/3 spicy tincture to 2/3 orange bitters, a half and half mix, or a mix of 1/3 orange bitters to 2/3 spicy tincture. With 3 tests to do and an increasing heat intensity, things went exactly how you would expect. Of course, I had to start with a mix of 1/3 spice to 2/3 orange bitters. Alright, let's try it. Okay. So I'm still getting the bitters from the orange bitters. I know what it tastes like. The heat does come through. That is about the same sample size of the heat that I got the first time. It's just a little diluted, but the heat is still there. Then I had to do the half and half mix to see how things measured up. Let's see. Okay. Oh. The mature jalapenos and the mature serranos pack a pleasurable amount of heat when they're just their pepper forms. As a tincture, that spice level's really high. I can barely taste the orange bitters, so it would seem I'm going to have to dial it back. God, from here. And finally, knowing which end of the spectrum I would ultimately land on, I braved myself for the 2/3 spice to 1/3 orange mixture. I'm doing this because I said I was going to do it. No. No. Oh, that's fun. So all the other times I've tried this spicy tincture, that right now, the heat was kept in the back of the throat. It has come up to my lips now. I don't like that. No. 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 God. Oh, God. Yeah, so needless to say, if you're making spicy bitters at home using a hot tincture, the ratio that I recommend is 1/3 spice to 2/3 orange bitters. And with that, it was finally time for me to try and reverse engineer the Texas Heat Margarita. That recipe goes a little something like this. We're gonna be shaking this cocktail, so you'll need a shaker tin. And for the drink, you'll need Blanco or silver tequila, blue Curacao, which is effectively triple sec or normal Curacao but dyed a blue. You'll need agave and tamarind syrup, your spicy bitters of choice, lima juice, today I'm using lime super juice, and your tahini or a similar spice blend. We're gonna start with 2 ounces of our Blanco tequila. Ooh, cork. Normally I like doing the expensive ingredients last, but I want to do a color change thing here. We're doing 1 ounce of lime juice. We're going to do a 1/2 ounce of our agave syrup. We're doing 1 ounce of tamarind syrup. We're going to do a dash of spicy bitters, in this case 10 drops. And finally, we're doing 1 ounce of blue Curacao. Yeah, look at that. Since this drink has citrus, we are going to shake it over ice. So 1 big ice cube and 1 cracked ice cube. It's a little messy, but it works. I'm gonna pour in our drink and give it a nice shake. And it wouldn't be horrendous if we didn't serve our cocktail in a blinky cup. Give it a dirty pour. Throw a couple dashes of tahini on there. And of course, activate your blinky cup. And this, my friends, is the Texas Heat Margarita from Halloween Horror Nights 30. Now let's see if I recreated this drink right. Cheers. When I finally tasted my recreated Texas Heat Margarita, I was blown away by the fact that it tasted exactly how I remembered the cocktail from Horror Nights. And despite how accurate my recreation was of the Texas Heat Margarita, there is a tragedy to this drink. And that is the simple fact that this cocktail is just okay. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad drink by any means. I enjoyed it the first time I had it, and I enjoyed my recreation, but when you consider how complicated the ingredient list is, and the fact that it just tastes like an ordinary pre-batch margarita, you have to question if it's worth making this drink at home or not. You have to consider how complicated the ingredient list is. I mean, the tamarind was very difficult for me to procure, and I didn't taste it at all in my drink. And on top of that, for being a Texas Heat Margarita, there's nothing really Texas heat about it. You know, unless you mix the tahini into the whole cocktail, and even then, it's still not that spicy. To be completely honest, you'd get more heat out of a handful of Takis. Now, I understand why the Texas Heat Margarita is built like this. At the end of the day, Universal is trying to sell drinks, and it behooves Universal to make drinks that people want to have, such as a simple margarita. So, it behooves them to make a drink that people want to buy. You know, it doesn't make sense for them to sell Texas Heat Margaritas that burn your face off, because people are going to let you know, hey, this drink is hot, don't buy it, and then Universal loses out on a sale. Not critiquing Universal for it, it's the nature of the beast, and honestly, I would probably do the same thing if I was in their position. But that's not a satisfying note to end on, is it? I mean, is that a proper ending to this video? What if you were excited by the title and wanted to make a Texas Heat Margarita at home? Does it feel right for me to rip the rug out from under you and tell you that it's just an okay drink and to not make it at home? That it tastes more or less the same as a margarita made with some sweet and sour mix? I don't think that's right. I know that there is a better, simpler version of the Texas Heat Margarita out there. And with a name like that, a drink like that needs to be done some justice, so I think I'm gonna have to make my own cocktail. So as you can see over... Oh, Wait a second. If you look here, this is my spec for the Texas Heat Margarita. Now, assuming that is correct, this is way too complicated of a drink that just tastes like any old pre-batched margarita you can get at any old theme park, so we gotta change that. If we're gonna improve this drink, there's a couple things we can do, and the first thing off the top of my head is simplifying the ingredient list. The agave syrup is an immediate candidate for being removed from the ingredient list for one simple reason. If you recall, in the tamarind syrup that I made, I already used agave syrup as part of my natural sweetener, so there's no reason for agave syrup to be on here a second time. With a simplified ingredient list, we now have to adjust the ratios of our ingredients to make sure that the spec is more balanced. Since the tamarind syrup is an ingredient that's a bit more difficult to procure, I'm thinking of adjusting the ratios so that the tamarind syrup sticks out a bit more amongst our other ingredients. So we're going to do a ½ ounce of blue curacao and 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice. This will help give the tamarind syrup a fighting chance. Since I used the peppers that I grew in my garden to make the hot tincture for my custom spicy bitters, I'm thinking of muddling some peppers into the drink to add that extra spice component. We're still going to keep the spicy bitters in this drink, but by muddling those peppers at the start, we're really going to make this a Texas Heat Margarita, you catch my drift? So when we mix all of our ingredients in the shaker tin, we're going to exclude the spicy bitters and add that instead as a float at the very end when we pour our drink into the glass. That way, the first sip or two are going to be extra hot. And instead of adding our tahini as a float on the top of the drink, we're actually going to make a salt rim with our tahini. I'm pretty happy with this new recipe, but I think it needs a new name because the Texas Heat Margarita Revisited or the Texas Heat Margarita Improved is a little too wordy for my tastes. Thankfully, I have a name in mind that pays tribute to the film that inspired this drink while still keeping the essence of the original name intact. I present to you all the Texan Heatwave. Let's make that drink. Now let's make a Texan Heatwave. We're going to start off with our salt rim, which in this case uses tahini. If you're using fresh limes for your lime juice, as you should, save one of the husks to wet the rim with lime juice to apply your tahini. If you're using lime super juice like me, you're going to need to dip your glass in a bowl with some super juice in the bottom to get that job done. Do not use store-bought lime juice in your cocktails, they will taste bad. You should always be using fresh limes or making a super juice for a sustainable budget-friendly alternative. Once your glass is sporting a beautiful tahini rim, it's time to get to mixing. So start off by adding some slices of your preferred pepper to your shaker tin. In my case, we're using jalapenos. We're going to add 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice to our glass and start muddling those peppers. Next, we're going to add 1 ounce of our tamarind syrup followed by a ½ ounce of our blue curacao. Finally, we're going to add 2 ounces of tequila to our mixing tin. If you happen to have a smoky mezcal on hand, this will probably make the drink taste insane, but we're sticking with the ingredients presented in the original margarita, so if you make the mezcal variant, let us know how it tastes in the comment section down below. We're going to shake our drink over crushed ice to properly mix the cocktail and brighten up the color. Once you're done, add a block of ice to your tahini-rimmed glass and strain your drink into the glass. You can do a dirty pour if you want extra ice and pepper bits in your drink, but straining this drink will make it look a little more classy. And as a finisher, add a dash or two of spicy bitters to the top of your drink. And that's how you make the Texan Heatwave. Let me tell you, this is a significant improvement over the original Texas Heat Margarita. Those first 2 sips are extra spicy thanks to our float of spicy bitters, but it's still a sweet margarita throughout. Muddling the peppers gave it a noticeable heat that lingers on the palate and makes for an overall good experience. It's not face-meltingly spicy, it's just hot enough to be worthy of the name while still being a sweet and enjoyable margarita. While the tamarind syrup is contributing to the drink's overall sweetness and more complex flavor profile, this is not a tamarind-forward drink, so you could probably get away with using an agave syrup or a honey syrup in a pinch. Overall, the Texan Heatwave is a great improvement over the original Texas Heat Margarita, and I hope those of you who make it at home enjoy it as much as I did. Let us know what you thought of this episode of Curious Cocktails by dropping a like or dislike and joining the comment section down below. Don't forget to subscribe for future episodes of this show, and be sure to check out other contributions to HHN at Home this year. We'd also appreciate it if you consider donating to the Trevor Project, which you can find a link to at the top of my description. And until next time, have the day you deserve. Later!